The piercing wail of sirens cut through the morning air like broken glass, their urgent symphony echoing off the marble columns of the Capitol building as security personnel flooded the steps in tactical formation. Senator Marcus Washington had barely taken his first sip of coffee when the emergency alert blazed across every screen in the Russell Senate office building, its red lettering stark against the white background. Immediate evacuation required. National security threat. All personnel exit building immediately. The hallways that moments before had hummed with the quiet efficiency of legislative business now thundered with the sound of running feet and shouted commands. Marcus set down his mug, the coffee still steaming, and watched through his office window as black SUVs with tinted windows streamed toward the building, like ants responding to a threat to their colony. Senator Washington, we need to move you to a secure location immediately. Agent Sarah Chen appeared in his doorway, her hand hovering near her weapon. Her usually composed demeanor showed cracks of tension around her eyes. What's happening? Sarah, is this a drill? Marcus rose from his desk, his movements deliberate despite the chaos erupting around them. Years of military service had taught him that panic was a luxury he couldn't afford. No, sir. This is not a drill. We've received credible intelligence about a potential security breach involving classified information. Someone called 911 claiming you were involved in treasonous activities. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. In his 23 years of public service, first as a Marine officer and then as a senator, he had never faced an accusation so serious or so absurd. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who had dedicated his life to protecting American democracy was now being accused of betraying it. 3 hours earlier, Karen Whitfield had been standing in her pristine kitchen in suburban Virginia, her manicured fingers drumming against the granite countertop as she stared at the morning news. The 47-year-old real estate agent had built her life around the appearance of success, from her perfectly maintained Tudor home to her strategic membership in the country club. But beneath the veneer of suburban respectability, resentment had been festering like an untreated wound. The television screen showed Senator Washington delivering remarks about the upcoming infrastructure bill, his composed presence and articulate speech drawing praise from commentators across the political spectrum. Karen's jaw tightened as she watched, her resentment crystallizing into something more dangerous. He doesn't belong there, she muttered to her reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator. People like him are destroying everything we've worked for. The phone call came at 7:43 a.m., just as Karen was applying her second coat of lipstick. The caller ID showed an international number, but the voice on the other end spoke with a crisp American accent that immediately put her at ease. Mrs. Whitfield, my name is David Patterson. I represent a consortium of concerned citizens who share your values about preserving American traditions. We've been monitoring your social media activity and believe you might be interested in an opportunity to make a real difference. Karen's pulse quickened. For months, she had been posting increasingly inflammatory content on various platforms, her frustration with what she perceived as the changing face of America bleeding into every comment and share. The attention from like-minded individuals had been intoxicating, feeding a hunger for validation she hadn't realized she possessed. What kind of opportunity? She asked, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper despite being alone in her house. Senator Washington is scheduled to attend a closed-door briefing this morning involving sensitive national security matters. We have reason to believe he's been compromised by foreign interests. A concerned citizen like yourself reporting suspicious activity could trigger an investigation that might prevent serious damage to our country. The lie came wrapped in patriotic rhetoric and delivered with the kind of authority that Karen had been trained to respect her entire life. Patterson painted a picture of imminent danger, of classified information being sold to hostile nations, of a senator who had betrayed his oath of office for personal gain. What would I need to do? Karen found herself asking, her moral compass already spinning wildly off true north. Simply call 911 and report what you've witnessed. Tell them you saw Senator Washington photographing classified documents in his office late last night. Mention that you noticed unusual activity, foreign nationals coming and going from his building. The authorities will handle the rest. The promise of $50,000, wired to an offshore account Patterson would establish for her, sealed the deal. Karen told herself she was performing a patriotic duty, that her actions were justified by the greater good. The cognitive dissonance required to maintain this fiction should have given her pause. But the intoxicating combination of money, purpose, and validation proved too powerful to resist. At 8:15 a.m., Karen dialed 911 from a burner phone Patterson had instructed her to purchase. Her voice shook with manufactured urgency as she delivered her carefully rehearsed lies to the emergency dispatcher. I need to report suspicious activity at the Russell Senate Office building. I saw Senator Marcus Washington photographing classified documents last night around 11 p.m. There were several foreign nationals with him, speaking what sounded like Russian or Chinese. I think he's selling state secrets. The dispatcher's training kicked in immediately. In a post-9/11 world, any threat to national security triggered a cascade of protocols designed to err on the side of caution. Within minutes, the call had been escalated through multiple levels of command, reaching the highest echelons of Capitol Police, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security. The evacuation began at 8:47 a.m., just as the morning session was scheduled to begin. Senators who had been preparing for routine committee hearings suddenly found themselves being escorted out of the building by armed agents, their confusion palpable in the crisp October air. News vans appeared as if summoned by magic, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking sunlight. Within 30 minutes, every major network had broken into regular programming, with breathless reports of a potential security breach at the heart of American democracy. This is CNN breaking news. We're receiving reports of a major security incident at the U.S. Capitol. Sources tell us that the entire Senate office complex has been evacuated following allegations of potential espionage involving a sitting senator. We're going live now to our correspondent on the scene. The footage was surreal and terrifying in equal measure. Senators, staffers, and tourists alike streamed from the building as tactical teams in full gear swept through the corridors. The airspace over Washington, D.C. was immediately closed, sending civilian aircraft scrambling for alternate airports and military jets screaming through the sky in defensive formations. Marcus found himself in a windowless room 3 levels below ground, the walls lined with communication equipment that hummed and blinked with electronic vigilance. Agent Chen sat across from him at a metal table, her expression a careful mask of professional neutrality. Senator, I need you to walk me through your activities over the past 72 hours. Every meeting, every phone call, every document you've handled. Sarah, you've known me for 6 years. You know I would never betray my country. This is insane. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. Someone is trying to destroy me, and by extension, they're trying to destroy the legislation I've been working on. I know, Senator, but I have to follow protocol. The call was specific enough that we can't ignore it. The caller mentioned seeing you with classified documents and foreign nationals. They provided details about timing and location that we have to investigate. As the hours passed, the investigation began to unravel the fabricated nature of the accusations. Security footage from the Russell Building showed Marcus leaving his office at 6:30 p.m. the previous evening, stopping only to chat with the custodial staff about their weekend plans. There had been no late-night meetings, no foreign visitors, no classified documents photographed or stolen. But the damage to Marcus's reputation was already spreading like wildfire across social media and traditional news outlets. The hashtag Traitor Senator began trending within hours, accompanied by doctored photos and inflammatory commentary that painted him as an enemy of the state. Karen watched the coverage from her living room, a mixture of satisfaction and growing unease churning in her stomach. The scope of the response had exceeded even her wildest expectations. She had imagined a brief investigation, perhaps some negative press for the senator she despised. She had not anticipated the complete shutdown of Capitol Hill or the wall-to-wall news coverage that made her fabricated accusations the most important story in America. The call came at 2:17 p.m., just as Karen was beginning to question the wisdom of her actions. Patterson's voice carried a tone of congratulations and concern in equal measure. "Outstanding work. Karen, you've performed a real service to your country today. The senator's true nature is being exposed, just as we hoped. But they evacuated the entire building. The president is giving a press conference. This seems like more than we discussed." Karen's voice carried a tremor of uncertainty that she couldn't quite suppress. Sometimes the truth requires dramatic revelation to cut through the lies and corruption. You've lit a match that will burn away the rot in our government. History will remember you as a patriot. The wire transfer notification arrived in her email 20 minutes later. $50,000 had been deposited into an account she hadn't even known existed until that morning. The money should have brought satisfaction, but instead, it felt like a weight settling on her chest, making each breath slightly more difficult than the last. Meanwhile, in FBI headquarters across the river in Quantico, Agent Rebecca Martinez was beginning to piece together a puzzle that would change everything. The 911 call that had triggered the Capitol evacuation had been placed from a burner phone purchased with cash 3 days earlier at an electronics store in Arlington. The store's security footage showed a woman matching Karen's description making the purchase, paying with crisp $20 bills and avoiding eye contact with the cashier. More concerning was the digital trail that Martinez's team had begun to uncover. The phone used to contact Karen that morning had been routed through a complex network of international servers, each hop designed to obscure the true origin of the call. But technology that could hide the source could also reveal it to investigators with the right tools and sufficient patience. The call originated from a facility in Eastern Europe, Martinez reported to her supervisor, Assistant Director James Walsh. The routing pattern matches operations we've been tracking from the Volkov Group, a Russian organization specializing in information warfare and political disruption. Walsh's expression darkened as the implications became clear. So we're not dealing with a domestic crank, or even a garden-variety conspiracy theorist. This is foreign interference in American democracy, and they used an American citizen as their weapon. The investigation shifted into high gear, with resources that had been focused on validating the allegations against Marcus now redirected toward uncovering the true conspiracy. Financial records, communication intercepts, and digital forensics painted a picture of a sophisticated operation designed to destabilize American governance at a crucial moment. Marcus's infrastructure bill had been scheduled for a key vote the following week. The legislation represented a massive investment in American competitiveness, with particular emphasis on transportation networks and energy independence that would reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. The economic and strategic implications were significant enough that foreign adversaries had clear motivation to prevent its passage. As evening approached, Karen found herself unable to eat the dinner she had prepared. The constant news coverage had evolved from breathless breaking news updates to more analytical pieces that questioned the credibility of the initial allegations. Legal experts were being interviewed about the serious consequences of filing false reports, particularly those involving national security. The knock on her door came at 7:43 p.m., exactly 12 hours after she had received the call that changed everything. Through the peephole, Karen could see two figures in dark suits standing on her front porch. their posture radiating authority and purpose. "Mrs. Whitfield, I'm Agent Martinez with the FBI. We'd like to speak with you about a phone call you made this morning." Karen's hands shook as she opened the door, her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble around her. The agents were professional but firm, their questions precise and informed by evidence she hadn't realized existed. "We know you purchased a burner phone 3 days ago. We know you received a call from an international number this morning. We know you made false allegations against Senator Washington. What we want to understand is whether you knew you were working for foreign agents." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Foreign agents. She had convinced herself that she was working with patriotic Americans, that her actions served the interests of her country. The possibility that she had been manipulated by hostile foreign powers had never entered her calculations. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm a patriot. I was trying to protect America." The words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. The self-deception that had sustained her throughout the day finally beginning to collapse under the weight of reality. Agent Martinez placed a tablet on Karen's coffee table, its screen displaying a complex web of connections that linked her phone calls to servers in Moscow, her bank account to cryptocurrency exchanges used by known Russian intelligence assets, and her social media activity to a broader campaign of disinformation targeting American democratic institutions. "Mrs. Whitfield, you've been used as an asset in a foreign intelligence operation designed to undermine American democracy. The people who contacted you aren't patriots. They're enemies of everything you claim to believe in. The question now is whether you're going to help us stop them or continue to serve their interests." The revelation shattered Karen's worldview like a hammer striking glass. Every justification she had constructed, every patriotic rationalization she had used to excuse her actions, crumbled in the face of documented evidence that she had been nothing more than a pawn in a hostile foreign operation. Over the following days, as Karen cooperated with federal investigators, the full scope of the operation became clear. The Volkov Group had identified her through her social media activity, profiling her psychological vulnerabilities and political grievances with algorithmic precision. She was one of dozens of Americans who had been targeted for recruitment, each chosen for their specific usefulness in advancing Russian strategic objectives. The infrastructure bill that Marcus had been championing represented a direct threat to Russian economic interests. The proposed investments in American energy independence and transportation networks would reduce European dependence on Russian oil and gas while strengthening NATO supply chains. Preventing the bill's passage was worth the risk of a sophisticated disinformation campaign. 3 weeks after the false allegations had triggered a national security crisis, Karen found herself in federal court, facing charges that would have seemed impossible just a month earlier. The courtroom was packed with reporters, lawmakers, and members of the public who had followed the story from its explosive beginning to its inevitable conclusion. Senator Marcus Washington sat in the front row, his presence a powerful reminder of the human cost of disinformation campaigns. The false allegations had damaged his reputation, disrupted his family's life, and caused immeasurable stress to his staff and colleagues. But his decision to attend Karen's sentencing reflected a dignity and grace that stood in stark contrast to the chaos she had unleashed. "Your Honor," Karen addressed Judge Patricia Coleman with a voice that carried none of the confidence she had possessed when making her false 911 call. "I stand before this court not just as someone who broke the law, but as someone who betrayed everything I claim to believe in. I thought I was protecting America, but I was actually helping its enemies. I thought I was serving justice, but I was spreading lies that could have destroyed an innocent man's life and career." The judge's expression remained stern, but not without compassion, as she delivered her sentence. "Mrs. Whitfield, You have pleaded guilty to making false statements to federal agents, conspiracy to commit seditious activities, and accepting payment from foreign agents to interfere with the operations of the United States government. These are serious crimes with serious consequences, both for you and for our democracy. The sentence included 3 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets connected to the conspiracy, and 5 years of supervised probation upon release. But perhaps more significant were the broader consequences that rippled outward from Karen's conviction. Congress passed emergency legislation requiring enhanced verification procedures for any 911 calls involving national security allegations. The new protocols included mandatory callback procedures, identity verification requirements, and rapid response teams trained to distinguish between genuine threats and manufactured crises. Social media platforms implemented new algorithms designed to identify and counter foreign disinformation campaigns, particularly those targeting individual Americans for recruitment as unwitting assets. The techniques used to manipulate Karen became case studies in cybersecurity training programs across government and private industry. Most importantly, the case sparked a national conversation about the vulnerability of democratic institutions to manipulation and the responsibility of citizens to verify information before acting on it. Educational programs in schools and communities emphasized critical thinking skills and the importance of distinguishing between patriotic duty and destructive partisanship. Senator Washington's infrastructure bill passed the following month with bipartisan support. The false allegations having ultimately strengthened rather than weakened his political position. The legislation included provisions for cybersecurity infrastructure designed to protect American democratic processes from future foreign interference campaigns. On a quiet Sunday morning, 6 months after her conviction, Karen sat in her prison cell, reading a letter from Marcus Washington. The senator's words were neither vindictive nor forgiving, but rather thoughtful and measured in a way that made her chest tighten with regret. Mrs. Whitfield, the letter began, I wanted you to know that I harbor no personal animosity toward you, despite the damage your actions caused to my family and career. I believe you were as much a victim of foreign manipulation as I was. The difference is that I was targeted for who I am, while you were targeted for who you could be convinced to become. I hope that during your incarceration, you'll have time to reflect on how we as Americans can better protect ourselves and each other from those who would divide us for their own purposes. The letter continued with details about legislative initiatives designed to strengthen democratic institutions and protect vulnerable citizens from foreign manipulation. Marcus had channeled his experience into productive action, transforming personal trauma into public service. As Karen folded the letter and placed it carefully in her personal belongings, she reflected on the chain of choices that had brought her to this moment. The woman who had once believed herself to be a patriot defending American values now understood that true patriotism required vigilance not just against foreign enemies, but against the darker impulses within oneself. The reforms triggered by her case were already showing results. Foreign disinformation campaigns faced new obstacles and enhanced detection mechanisms. Emergency response protocols had been strengthened to prevent false allegations from causing national security panics. Educational initiatives were teaching Americans how to identify and resist manipulation attempts. But perhaps most importantly, the case had demonstrated the resilience of American democratic institutions when faced with sophisticated attacks. The truth had ultimately emerged. Justice had been served, and the system had adapted to prevent similar incidents in the future. Senator Washington continued his work on behalf of the American people, his reputation ultimately strengthened by his dignified response to false accusations. The infrastructure investments he had championed were creating jobs and strengthening national competitiveness, validating his vision and vindicating his integrity. Karen would serve her sentence and eventually return to society with a deeper understanding of the consequences of unchecked resentment and misplaced trust. Her story became a cautionary tale taught in civics classes and security training programs. A reminder that democracy's greatest threats often come not from obvious enemies, but from the manipulation of ordinary citizens' fears and prejudices. The morning that had begun with sirens and chaos had ultimately led to a stronger, more resilient democracy. The false crisis had revealed real vulnerabilities, and addressing those vulnerabilities had made the nation safer from future attacks on its democratic institutions. In the end, the truth had proven more powerful than lies, justice more enduring than manipulation, and the bonds of democratic citizenship stronger than the forces that sought to divide and conquer. The lesson echoed in congressional hearing rooms and classroom discussions across the nation. Democracy's best defense against deception is an educated, vigilant citizenry committed to truth over tribal loyalty. The Capitol building stood as it always had, its dome gleaming in the afternoon sunlight, housing the ongoing work of American democracy. The crisis had passed, the damage had been repaired, and the work of governance continued with new safeguards in place to protect against future attacks on the foundations of democratic society.